Are you thinking about starting a plant-based diet? Maybe it's for weight loss reasons, maybe for your health or environmental reasons. If so, you're not alone because 1/4 of all Americans say they're trying to eat less meat. Are you wondering about that? If you should go plant-based? Now, I should say that when I say plant-based, we're not talking about that you have to go vegan. I'm personally not a vegan. In other words, I do still eat some animal products. I'm not a vegetarian either, but I definitely follow a plant-based approach where I eat, smaller amounts of meat and more amounts of plants. So there's no one definition, but maybe you're thinking, well, I don't know, should I be going on a plant-based diet? Maybe you think you're not going to get enough protein, especially if you want to build muscle mass, or maybe you're worried about vitamin deficiencies because if you heard that animal products have vitamin B12, and if you avoid them, you're not going to get enough of that. Or maybe you worry that you're going to be hungry. We're going to address all of that with today's guest. She's Robin Withrow-Wong, a registered dietitian out in California who works with people with type 2 diabetes and helping them with a plant-based approach. She also has 2 podcasts. One is called Veg Heads Speaks. The other is called No Pills, No Hunger, where she addresses diabetes and a plant-based approach. So please welcome Robin Withrow-Wong.
Welcome to the Energize Your Life podcast, hosted by keynote speaker, author, and peak performance expert, Dr. Joe. Listen in as Dr. Joe and her guests talk about how to energize your life so you can be happier, healthier, and more productive.
Hello and welcome, Robin.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, Dr. Joe. I'm so glad you found me.
Yeah, so nice to meet you. So we're going to be talking about myths regarding a plant-based diet. And so why don't we just kind of jump right in? I mean, give us some ideas of some things that we might be confused about for people that are saying, I can't go plant-based.
Yeah,
I don't want to be a vegetarian.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, I could never give up meat. The big one I hear is I could never give up cheese, right? And so some of the myths I hear frequently when people find out you're plant-based, and they're confused between veganism and plant-based eating, but they're similar. I said plant-based is like veganism with a twist. We eat more whole foods, less processed foods, and less oil. But it's really, where do you get your protein? Okay, that is the big myth. They're really worried about having a protein deficiency. And honestly, I can tell you in the US, there is really no protein deficiency.
Yeah.
there just isn't. Other countries maybe, but not here. We have an issue with almost too much food. Okay, so really it's a myth because people don't think of beans and legumes and peas and lentils and tofu as protein. They only think of protein as being meat products. And what they don't think about is what they're getting when they eat that source of protein. And that's what, as plant-based eaters, we try to avoid. It's the stuff that comes with the meat, the saturated fat and the cholesterol, okay? So that's really the myth. It's just like you can get completely full. And just a reminder that meat doesn't have any fiber at all, whereas the beans and legumes, all those plant-based foods, the fruits and veggies and whole grains all have a lot of fiber, so it fills you up. And I know that's another myth, so we can talk about that.
So it fills you up. And, when we talk about fiber, a lot of people think in terms of allowing them to go to the bathroom, right?
Yes.
Kind of fills you up and gives you some bulk there to go to the bathroom.
And it does do that, right? Yeah.
It does do that, but it also fills us up, reduces our risk of colon cancers.
Yes.
And it gives us that healthy gut, which, helps us in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, microbiome's a big deal right now, as you know. And so that's a really good point. Also, if you're type 2 have type 2 diabetes, which I work with a lot of women with type 2 diabetes, it's really having fiber in your diet is your friend because it helps regulate your blood sugars. Okay. And
so you don't get the spikes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Slows down the absorption so you get a more even flow rather than the quick ups and downs.
Yes.
Right.
And so fiber, and honestly, as Americans in the US, we eat about half of our daily fiber requirement. I mean, and so when people ask, how do you get your protein? I almost want to kind of shoot back with, how do you get your fiber? If you're eating so much meat and cheese, there is zero fiber in animal products. Okay. But they never think about that. And so really that's a big issue, not getting enough fiber. Like you said, colon cancer. And so
that's a cute rebuttal. I like that.
Yeah,
you know, when they say, "How do you get enough protein?" Well, how do you get enough fiber?
yeah, it's sort of like that, but I got to pick and choose who I say it to. They get a little defensive.
Do you eat any animal products at all?
No, I do not. No, I do not.
And there are a lot of people probably, I don't know exactly where I fall into it, but I am not a vegetarian. I definitely feel like I eat plant-based, meaning that there's always plants in my diet. I can't imagine, like you mentioned earlier before we got to recording, about how people just don't eat a wide variety of foods. And
they don't.
Going plant-based gives you that variety that I really crave. But some people call themselves a flexitarian. So they're not really vegetarian, but they're not a big meat eater. And a lot of it is based on kind of being flexible based on the situation, perhaps.
Yeah. And I actually love that term because it's not for everybody. It is really not. You know, we went plant-based and I had my 4 children at home when we did it. My husband had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And he wasn't overweight. We were active. We thought we were eating a healthy diet, right? And so he didn't want to go on the meds. And so we started really searching and we found this worked for us and I transitioned our whole family. But is it easy for everybody? I have clients that just can't do it wholehearted, 100%.
Right.
Yet they get results by even making small changes. So let's say they eat a piece of fish once a week, and yet they're adding more beans and vegetables and that sort of thing into their diet. So I love that approach because it works with their lifestyle. Right. And yet they're getting the benefits of it. So,
right. And so
flexitarian is a great way of looking at it.
And it is on a spectrum. In other words, there are some people that perhaps eat animal products every single meal.
Yeah.
So think about it. What if you were to eat it twice a day rather than 3 times a day, or once a day rather than twice, right? So we don't have to think in terms of being perfect. But doing something along that spectrum. So a little bit would be better. In fact, Robin, you had a really interesting story. I didn't realize, because you and I are somewhere in that same generation, and yet I've been in nutrition as a registered dietitian for decades. And you're relatively new because of what happened with your husband, right?
Exactly.
Tell that story.
Oh, so it really, I always loved eating healthy, what I thought was healthy, and feeding my family healthy. And we were very active as a family and still are. But when he was diagnosed, I just was like, whoa, I've got to change things up. And so I really started attending lectures, and I went back to school, and I got really bit by the nutrition bug. And I really felt this passion around changing people's lives through nutrition and really helping them avoid chronic diet-related diseases like type 2 diabetes. And so at the age of 56, I literally went back to graduate school, got my master's degree, became a dietitian, and it was a haul. I had to commute 4 hours a day. And so this has to tell you how passionate I am about this topic, right? Because people that age they thought I was the teacher when I'd walk into the classroom, right? I mean, so it's really is what I love doing, because it's so rewarding to see people change their lives. It really is. And
congratulations and welcome to the field.
Yes, I love it. I do. I absolutely love it. I do.
I can tell.
Yeah.
So the first myth, it has to do with you can get plenty of protein. So
you can. You have to kind of be creative and think of food differently. But you can totally get plenty of protein. I think I wrote down, the average woman, 130-pound woman, needs about 68 grams of protein a day. And so if you think about a cup of beans has 15 grams, right? And so
almost 1/4 of the way.
Yeah. I mean, and you eat a bean burrito, or you eat, that's just, you can incorporate it in, and so you start putting beans on your salad, so it's really possible. You have to just kind of think out of the box a little bit. So
Yes.
yeah, so that's the biggest one I hear. Another myth I hear, and we talked a little bit about this, Dr. Joe, is I'm going to be deficient in B12 or other vitamins and minerals, right? And you had an interesting story about that. You want to share that?
Oh, yeah. We were talking about it before. When I turned 50, my doctor ordered a series of blood work, like you do at your an ordinary annual exam. But all of a sudden, he was asking about, getting my B12 checked. He checked it off on this form, and I'm thinking, what a waste of my money. I knew it wouldn't be covered by insurance, and I thought, that is insane. But at that point, I was already at the lab. And he had checked it off, and I'm like, I can't erase it or anything like that. So I drew my lab. Well, they drew my lab, and I was surprised when I got it back because my B12 was deficient. And I called up my mom at the time, and I was telling her about it. I said, isn't this weird? I eat animal products, that shouldn't be an issue. And I heard that older people do have an issue sometimes with absorbing B12, but come on, I just turned 50. I'm not that old yet. And she said, well, it runs in the family. I said, it does? Why didn't you tell me? And she said, don't you remember when we moved? And she talked about how when I was 12, we moved from one state to another, but she would go back every month, and all of us would pile in the car because she had to go. And she gave her dad a shot of B12.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know why we were going. I thought we were going to visit relatives. I didn't realize that. And she said, yeah, remember, Papa needed those shots of B12 every single month. And I said, no, I didn't remember. So, since then we've, found out there are other people in the family that have this. So there are people even outside of being vegetarian or whatnot that do run into B12 deficiencies. But what I found out, it is simple. You just take a supplement. In fact, the way that my grandfather was treated with the shots of B12 is an outdated mentality. We don't need to have a shot. We don't need to pay a lot of money to go into the doctor's office. You just take a very high dose of B12, only a small amount is absorbed, and we get plenty of B12. So
and as we talked about, even now the recommendations are for people over 50 to supplement, whether you're vegan or not, whether you're plant-based or not, just because our bodies change the acids. And because absorbing B12 is a kind of a complicated process, right?
Yeah.
You have to have intrinsic factor, all these things that nutritionists love, okay?
Right.
Dietitians love to talk about.
Two parts, the B12 that you eat and the part in your stomach that, together, create the 12. Right. And as we get older, we don't produce as much of what's in our stomach. And I'll tell you, if you're taking any kind of antacids or things that reduce the acid, like, for example, if you have GERD or any other type of acid reflux, then you're more likely to get B12 deficiency, whether you eat meat or not. So.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a really good point. And so, like I said, we like to nerd out about this as dietitians, but really what you need to know is that get tested if you're over 50 and just check it out. It's a simple supplement. It's simple if you're plant-based. I tell my clients to just, take one. Sometimes they're higher doses than they really need to absorb, and so take one a week. And I actually recommend vitamin D for a lot of my clients as well, because we know as we age that that's another thing that isn't absorbed as well. But so anyway, B12 is another. And I got to say, with all the other vitamins and minerals, if you're eating plant-based, you're going to get a ton of way more
other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So let's not worry about that one little one that is easily taken care of, right?
Exactly. It's just, especially if you're eating a rainbow of vegetables and fruits, you're going to get everything, because you really don't get that from eating meat. You don't get any of the antioxidants that you get from fruits and vegetables, right? So people just have this idea that they have to eat this, meat to get their vitamins, and it's really quite the opposite. Yeah. So one of my other myths, shall I go on? Was that you're going to be hungry. They think they're going to be hungry, or they're never going to fill up, right? And, no, it's quite the opposite. I have clients that tell me, how can I lose weight and eat this much? Okay. Because you're eating foods filled with fiber that we talked about, and it fills you up, and your body uses it really effectively, all the nutrients and everything in it effectively. And so you need to eat more frequently, because you're not eating a lot of oil that keeps you full, right? So that's what I have found anyway. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Joe?
Oh, I think so, but there's nothing wrong with eating more frequently anyway.
No,
yeah. And I don't know if I share with you, I got into the field of nutrition. You have your story. Mine is at the age of 16, I went through anorexia and I lost 50 pounds off of where I am right now.
Wow.
50. And then I went through the stages where I had bulimia and binge eating and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is, when I was going through recovery, I was instructed to eat 6 times a day, 6 small meals a day. And it was at that point that I realized, even though we know that eating disorders are a mental disorder, right? And you need to do some head work. But at the same time, I found that when I ate 6 times a day, like every 3 hours, I never got overly full, which to me led me to eat more. It's kind of like I would get full and say, oh, I might as well eat the whole bag type of thing.
Okay.
And then, but if I got too hungry, like look out, I would overeat. And so for me, to prevent overeating, to prevent binge eating, I found that it was great to eat 6 small meals a day to keep myself feeling like Goldilocks, happy, not too full, not too hungry.
Yeah.
And so, if eating plant-based does make you a little hungrier more often, think about that as an opportunity to then eat something.
Eat again.
It doesn't mean 6 meals. It could be, 3 meals.
Yeah, whatever it is. And especially the women I work with who have diabetes, it's to eat more frequently, it's that blood sugar management again, right? And so it's really, you won't be hungry. I mean, I do have to say though, that when I first transitioned my kids, they were doing 2-a-days for sports and everything. And my one son he was playing soccer pretty aggressively, and he'd come home and be hungry. And he's like, I felt really weak. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I wasn't feeding him enough. Okay. So he needed more calories, and because he was burning them through them so fast. And so I would send him a lunch literally in a grocery sack, like 3 green burritos and this and that. And so really, you have to eat a higher volume than you're used to. And so that's an adjustment they fail to make sometimes. So
a higher volume if you're very active, but probably not an issue for most of us that have a few extra pounds.
That is true. True. Yeah.
You probably found with your clients, when they start eating plant-based, they lose weight, and they're thinking,
they do.
Maybe
effortlessly.
It doesn't like maybe drop off, but they're losing weight. And they're like, I'm not even doing anything. I'm not restrictive. I'm not gone hungry. So I think that's really good. I think the reason why people think that they're going to be hungry on a plant-based diet is they're focusing on what they can't have versus all the stuff they can have.
Yeah, and that's really, again, it's that paradigm shift, right? And so when you look at it from a perspective of why are you doing this? Is it strictly for weight loss? Then it makes it harder. If you're doing it from a perspective like for us, it was motivated by health. It was motivated by wanting better health and staying off medication. It made the transition so much easier because it's like your why is different, right? And so this is like, and the kids were on board because they're like, this is good for dad's health. And I made delicious food. You can make delicious food. Okay. And so it just was very seamless. And I think people just have this idea that it's going to be restricted more like a diet. And it really isn't. It's a lifestyle, and the motivation is from health. So,
and I know you work with people with diabetes and pre-diabetes. And I think what most people don't realize, we always hear about cancer, how many people have cancer, or we hear about heart disease. But when you look at the statistics, almost 1/2 of all American adults have either diabetes or pre-diabetes, meaning that if they don't do something, they're probably heading into diabetes. I think it's at like 43-44%, something like that. It's huge. And so a lot of us need to be watching our blood sugar for certain.
Yeah, they do. And, I just want to say really quickly about that, and do something when you have prediabetes. People just ignore it, and even doctors sometimes won't tell you. Because they're like, oh, your sugar. they might say your sugars are a little high instead of saying you have pre-diabetes. And people just kind of go, oh, what is that? They don't know what it means. So they ignore it. And what we know is you start then making some of these small changes that you can have a huge impact on your health. I mean, huge. So
that's a really good point, Robin, because people think that the ill effects of diabetes occurs when their blood sugar gets to a certain amount that then indicates diabetes, when in fact it's progressive, right? If it's what I hear is it's a touch high. I hear that from people. Yeah, my blood sugar is a touch high. And then I look at their lab values and I'm like, you have pre-diabetes, you know? Right.
And I don't know why that is. So really, you know, I'm trying to promote people to just get tested, ask your doctor, and know the numbers yourself so you can be your own advocate.
There's 3 ways that you can get diagnosed with diabetes. One is through your fasting blood sugar. So what is a normal fasting blood sugar? When does it become diabetes? Where are you in the middle with pre-diabetes?
6.5 and above. You're diabetes.
Oh, you're
diabetes.
going with the A1C.
A1C, yeah.
Oh, see, that is one of them. See, A1C, I think is something that people are less familiar.
Oh, you think so? Okay, I'm not as well versed in the fasting because I use A1Cs. It's my client.
Exactly, because when you have diabetes, then you switch to watching. And so for those of people who don't realize, okay, everybody knows their fasting blood sugar because it's drawn at your yearly lab exam. And so if it's under 100, that's normal.
You're good. But here's the thing, Dr. Joe, people don't go in and get their blood drawn. They don't go to the doctor. They're afraid. And especially women who may be a little bit overweight, they also, because the doctors just tell them lose weight. And so they avoid going to the doctor. Right. But no, so go ahead. I didn't interrupted you. I was
but you're absolutely right, Robin. We've got to be educated about our body. To put it out of sight, out of mind doesn't change anything that's going on in our body, all those changes. And when we have diabetes, it increases our risk of heart disease. You know, diabetes, I think, is the leading cause of blindness because it affects, the high blood sugar affects those tiny little blood vessels in your eyes and your kidneys. It can lead to gangrene because it shuts off those
neuropathy.
The neuropathy, which is that nerve damage.
Kidney issues.
So I mean, there's so many effects of that blood sugar, but still, if you're going for your annual exam, that is just your fasting, and that is one way to diagnose it. But there's some people who have a normal fasting blood sugar, but what happens after they eat, it gets up too high and it doesn't come down. And fasting, you know, blood sugar should be like a roller coaster. It goes up and it comes down. And then the next time you eat, it goes up and that comes down. It's supposed to do that. And remember, glucose, which is what blood sugar is. We're measuring blood glucose. That is, and I talk about energy. I mean, this is where our brain gets the energy that we need. And that little tiny brain up there weighing in only 2% of our body weight, is 25% of all the calories that we need, 25% of all the fuel that our body needs. So, you know, the glucose is so critical.
It is.
Hey, let me interrupt for just a second and remind you that, of course, I speak about energy. And if you haven't yet, please go to my website and take my 10-question energy quiz to find out how your energy is, because I've got a free PDF download. Once you take a quiz, you'll get the 21 ways to beat the afternoon slump. It's about how to keep your energy up all day long and, of course, stay healthy as well. So go to drjo.com/energy quiz. drjo.com/energy quiz. All right, let's get back to the interview.
And, you know, so many people with diabetes, and we kind of got off the myths, but I'm so passionate about type 2 diabetes.
But Robin, I will say that is one of the myths too. People only check their fasting and they don't realize, no, there's 2 other ways to check it. And it could be your issue someplace else. In lowering it after a meal, or what you talked about, A1C. And I think we need to talk about that because your fasting blood sugar is on the spot measurement, what it is right this moment. A1C is something that gives you a value that is the equivalent of what it's been like over a 3-month period. So it's a lot more accurate. No wonder you use that in your practice. And
I do.
Most people, once they develop diabetes or pre-diabetes, definitely should be doing that on a regular basis. But it's a good idea for all of us to get our A1C checked.
Well, and let me tell you this, my husband, before we started checking his A1C, he would try to game the system before his blood draw. He would go out and jog. Okay, because we know exercise lowers your blood glucose, right? So he wanted a lower reading. I'm like, who are you trying to kid, right? And so when I was
you can kid the doctor, but you're not kidding the body, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so when they finally started testing his A1C, I was so started looking at that. I was like, okay, he can't do, because it shows 3 months what you've been doing, right? But it's just like, so really, it was so frustrating to me.
As a dietitian, I used to use both of those when I worked many, many years working with people only with diabetes. And I would ask them about their fasting, and they'd bring in these paper reports, and they would say, it would say 80, 80, 80, like it was like too perfect. And then we'd get the A1C back, and like you said, it was 7 or 8, like ridiculously high. And then you knew, probably those numbers are not accurate. Somebody made them up right before they're coming into the clinic. They're writing down some numbers, right? Or maybe their fasting is normal. The problem is later on after
the spikes, that don't come down. Yeah.
So it's a good idea to ask about your A1C as well.
It is. Yeah.
So we've talked about you can get plenty of protein.
You can
by eating plant-based diet. It is super easy to take care of that B12 with a supplement. But you're getting so many more vitamins and minerals
right.
than you possibly get on a heavy animal-based diet. So what are some other?
So some others are that people think they're going to lose muscle. If you're an athlete, or weekend warrior type, and it is a concern because as we age, you start to lose muscle, right? We do. I mean, it's just a natural progression of aging, unfortunately. So you need to work hard to hold on to what you have. But there's this great movie called The Game Changers, and it really profiles elite athletes at the professional level. And one of them is like the strongest man in the world. And he is this huge muscle guy. And people say, how do you be so strong and like an ox and not eat meat? And his retort is, have you ever seen an ox eat meat? Right. And so his point is, that you don't need to get your protein. Protein does not build muscles. Exercise of your muscles, moving your muscles builds muscle, right?
Well,
and so
protein is needed to build muscle.
It's needed.
But you need both.
You need both. Okay. And so it's like, but if you're eating I assure you, if you're eating meat, you're getting way more protein. Are you muscling out? I mean, right? I don't know.
Just because you eat more protein doesn't build more muscle. No, you
does not.
Need to do the work.
The exercise. Yeah, you need to work the muscles. So anyway, so it's kind of a myth. And the movie's super great because it's what it's showing actually for athletes is that eating a plant-based, living the plant-based lifestyle really reduces the inflammation. And it allows you the recovery time to happen so quickly, which is really imperative if you're training at that high level, right? And so it's like you need to go back and train again at a high level. And if your muscles are sore, so the recovery time is reduced. And that's a big thing for me personally, as I age, I noticed after I'd go out and ride my bike hard, I'd be like, oh, it took me longer to recover. And it was really frustrating. And now I'm kind of back to where I was. It's like, oh, I'm sore for a day and I'm back on. So
fabulous.
Yeah, so that was kind of an interesting thing. So we talked about being hungry, B12, and now we talk about losing muscle. And I think one of the last things is people think it's going to be expensive. Okay, and that I think myth comes from people want to replace meat, and they buy the faux meats. They buy the faux vegan meats. They buy the Beyond Burgers or the Impossible Burgers, right? Because they haven't really made that shift that I'm not going to eat meat. And so they're trying to replace it instead of replacing it with whole foods like beans and legumes and tofu and those things. And so that is more expensive. But you're literally, if you're buying whole foods, in their most natural form and avoid the processed food, it's not any more expensive. And you don't have to buy organic. You can buy frozen vegetables. And so I don't know.
And canned beans.
Yes.
I'll give you all permission for canned beans. My husband comes home every once in a while with these bagged beans because they are way cheaper than the canned ones, but we never get around to soaking them and cooking them and seasoning them. And oh, please, I give you all permission to eat the canned beans.
Well, and actually, you can find black beans frozen that are partially cooked, and then they're even faster to cook. But I invested in a pressure cooker. I invested in a pressure cooker, so it's pretty fast. But canned beans are fine. I buy the low sodium. I rinse them, and so yes, it's so convenient. And if you're really on a budget, the dried beans are the way to go. But I was so thrilled at COVID. Not about COVID, but I went to the dry bean aisle and it was empty. And I was like, oh my God, everyone's eating beans. Yay. Or they're all in the pantry.
Bought them, but they didn't necessarily make them because I've got a stockpile in my pantry. And good thing they last forever, but I think it'll take forever to get through them.
Let me interject for just a moment and let you know that on episode 55, I spoke with Jill Weisenberger, a dietitian, a diabetes expert, who talked about how to prevent diabetes. So be sure to go back after this episode and listen to episode 55.
Right.
Robin, that was extremely helpful. I think people are going to get a lot out of that information.
Thank you.
And hopefully they'll be eating more plants in the future. So, Robin, if they want to know more about you and what you do, how can they reach out to you?
Oh, so you can find me at Nutrition with Robin. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. It's Robin at nutritionwithrobinrdn.com. Might be changing that soon, but you can still find me there.
I'll put that in the show notes.
So that's
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.